The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Johnson, for 5 minutes. Mr. Johnson, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Secretary Granholm. Nice to meet you, and thank you for joining us today. You know, I'm very concerned that radical environmentalists are increasingly calling the shots for the Democratic Party, from the White House all the way down to the local level. We're seeing an all-out push to regulate and legislate America's cheap and abundant coal, oil, and natural gas resources out of existence, from the cancellation of the Keystone XL pipeline to some liberal communities declaring their intention to actually turn off the gas lines in their neighborhoods. It's clear that Democrats in office nationwide are following the Biden administration's lead. Here's maybe how you can help, Madam Secretary. As former governor, maybe you could have a talk with the current occupant of the Michigan governor's mansion and convince her to stop trying to shut down the Enbridge Line 5 pipeline, which, if successful, would kill thousands of jobs in my home state of Ohio. Or maybe you could remind her that what you said just last week at the White House is actually true, that in terms of moving fuel, you said, and I quote, pipe is the best way to go. And I agree, because pipelines safely move vast quantities of oil and gas products safely across the country, including from eastern and southeastern Ohio, a region blessed with an abundance of oil and natural gas reserves, providing thousands of good-paying jobs to the people that I represent. So, Madam Secretary, research shows that the administration's cancellation of the Keystone XL pipeline will actually increase our nation's carbon footprint, an increase equivalent to the emissions of 500,000 more cars. Doesn't this make it obvious that the administration canceled the pipeline because of politics, not for climate benefits?
No. The Department of, well, let me just say this, with respect to the Keystone and the Department of Energy, which is my role here, that we are a cooperating agency.
No, I'm asking you a specific question, Madam Secretary. Did the administration cancel the pipeline because of politics? Because it was clearly not for climate benefits, because it's going to increase it's going to increase carbon emissions.
No, it canceled. I mean, the president made this commitment because he believed that there are other ways to go, especially in promoting clean energy and cheap energy.
But you said that pipe is the cleanest way, the safest way to move fuel. Here's another question then. You'll certainly be advising the president on these matters. Do you think the Biden administration will apply this same approach to other pipelines moving forward?
I can't predict what the administration is going to do, but can I just clarify that what I said regarding the Colonial pipeline was because Colonial is the only way to be able to get gasoline from one place to another along that seaboard, because there aren't deep water ports to be able to allow tankers in.
Well, we can haul it on tankers over the roadway, but I like your statement. I'm on your side. I agree with you that pipe is the best way to move fuel. So I hope you'll stand on that, and that's the way you'll advise the Biden administration. Madam Secretary, are you aware that the Clean Future Act that my Democratic colleagues are touting would essentially ban hydraulic fracturing in new pipelines, because it essentially will shut down the market for petrochemical products? Do you support that banning of hydraulic fracturing in new pipelines?
I am here representing the administration, and the administration has not supported a ban on fracking other than on public lands.
No, I didn't ask you if you're supporting the administration. I asked you, do you support the Clean Future Act that would essentially shut down hydraulic fracturing?
I support the goals of the Clean Future Act, and I don't know the specific provision that you are talking about.
I know what I would encourage you to. I'd encourage you to take a look at that, because it's diametrically opposed to what you say is the best way to move fuel. Madam Secretary, months into this administration, we're starting to see their energy agenda taking shape. It involves bringing millions of electric vehicles onto an inadequate energy grid, relying on, as your colleague John Kerry put it, green technology we don't yet have. And most alarmingly, leaving in the ground America's natural resources of oil and gas, all too rich, strict, all to restrict carbon-free goals. When we add all this up, do you believe it's even possible without compromising national security and grid reliability and America's standard of living to accomplish the goals that John Kerry's talking about?
Yes, I do.
Okay, that's interesting. Because you seem to have a different view on transit,
Gentlemen,
but that's okay.
time,
I yield back.
the gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman lady yields back. The chair now recognizes the distinguished gentleman from the great state of West Virginia, Mr. McKinley, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Madam Secretary. Look, to reduce global CO2, the administration has been calling for zero carbon emissions from American power plants by 2035. And in testimony to Congress, John Kerry stated that CO2 levels greater than 350 parts per million are dangerous. So my question, can you guarantee me that the Biden plan will lower global emissions to less than 350 parts per million?
Well, what I can guarantee you is that us getting back into the Paris
No,
Agreement.
it's just a yes or no, please, Madam Secretary. Can you guarantee me that we'll get below 350?
I'm not in the business of guaranteeing.
Okay, thank you. So let me run through just a series of observations then. The Institute for Energy Research and others have testified that the residential utility rates are expected to increase skyrocket to $2,000 to $4,000 if we rely totally on 100% renewables. And if we shut down all the coal and natural gas power plants by 2035, entire communities will be hollowed out. Millions of jobs are going to be lost in a transition. Tax revenues for schools, hospitals, and first responders are going to be slashed. Children and families are going to suffer. Experts have testified before this very committee that extreme weather events will still occur unless China and India decrease their emissions. And speaking to John Kerry, just last week before Foreign Affairs, he warned us that trusting China to lower their emissions would be, quote, stupid and malpractice. So let me get this straight. Utility bills are going to go up. Our neighbors are going to lose their jobs. Our schools will lose funding. We will still have extreme weather events. The CO2 in the atmosphere will still be dangerously high. And Kerry says we can't trust China, the worst polluter, to lower its emissions. So it appears to me that this administration is willing to make sacrificial lambs out of coal miners, pipeliners, gas workers, just to fit his political and liberal ideology. So, Madam Secretary, if you think America would be providing global leadership that you were starting to hint toward, that's naive. The rest of the world is not following, and you know that. In fact, China just announced a few weeks ago that they're building 250 gigawatts more coal-fired power plants. That's the equivalent of all the coal-fired power plants we have in America. And they're also announcing that they're building 20 new coal-fired power plants in Africa. So what are you doing? If this is the administration's definition of environmental justice, you're ignoring reality. So let me pivot then, Madam Secretary. According to the McKinsey report, people will be moving around the cities, moving into cities around the globe at a rate of 1 million people per week from now until 2050. And these people are going to need places to live and work. If the Paris Accord discourages or prohibits the production of concrete, plastic, steel, and aluminum because of their CO2 emissions, and they discourage us from harvesting trees because that is such an obvious sink for our environmental contributions, what do we have left? Straw, mud, clay? I mean, according to the Professor Goldthorpe at MIT, in responding to the study, he said the most logical material available to meet this these demands are products derived from fossil fuels. These products were being pursued under the Trump administration's, quote, coal to products program. But last month, the DOE at the National Coal Council meeting, Jennifer Wilcox of DOE said you would not be pursuing coal to products. So, Madam Secretary, I'm going to say, if McKinsey and MIT are correct, how will we meet this global need for construction material if we don't use fossil fuels? Can you elaborate?
I can. So that was a lot, and let me take pieces of it. Number one, we are interested in using coal ash and coal waste to extract critical minerals. We think there's an opportunity there, and in fact, the National Energy Technology Laboratory is working on just that. The head of the National Energy Technology Laboratory, you probably know, is Brian Anderson. Brian Anderson has been put in charge of a coal and power plant communities work group because this administration is so focused on making sure that West Virginia, Appalachia, coal regions get the benefit of this movement of the globe toward clean energy technologies. There is a $23 trillion market for products that reduce CO2 emissions. West Virginia can be at the front and center of that. West Virginia can be a place where coal miners are actually installing the carbon capture.
If I could, I know our time's run out. Don't just tell me.
Gentlemen's time is expired.
Thank you.
The gentleman's time is expired. The chair now recognizes the chairman of the Environmental Subcommittee,